Before you buy WP Sync, I want to test something very specific. Can this actually replace part of the automation setup you're already paying for? Because on paper, WP Sync sounds impressive. Connect WordPress to your marketing tools. Move leads and customers automatically. Map fields. Apply tags. And potentially avoid recurring automation task costs. But here's the problem. An automation tool is only valuable if it works with your workflow. So instead of spending 5 minutes reading features, let's get straight into the product. This is WP Sync. And what you're looking at here is basically the control center for connecting your WordPress environment with other services. The first thing I'm interested in isn't the number of integrations. It's this. Can I create a useful workflow without turning this into a technical nightmare? Because that's where automation software usually lives or dies. Let's test that. Let's imagine I'm collecting leads. Someone submits a form. I want that contact moved into my email system. Then I want the correct information mapped over. And I may want a tag applied based on what that person did. That's the basic automation. Source. Destination. Data. Action. Simple enough. But here's where things get interesting. Because moving an email address isn't particularly impressive. The important question is whether you can control what happens to the data after it moves. First name. Email. Custom fields. Tags. Potentially other customer information depending on the integration. That's the part that determines whether this is actually useful for a real business. And now I want to test the part that can become annoying very quickly. Filtering. Imagine you have two types of contacts. Leads. And customers. You probably don't want to treat them exactly the same. A lead might receive one sequence. A buyer might receive another. So if WP Sync simply dumps everything into one destination, that's not much of an automation system. You need control. The current product material describes features around filters, tags, custom fields and field mapping. And this is where I start seeing the practical appeal. You're not just saying, move this contact. You're potentially saying, move this contact if this condition is true, map the information correctly, and apply the appropriate action. That's much closer to a real marketing workflow. But there's a problem. More control can also mean more complexity. And that's what I want to test next. If you're an experienced marketer, this type of interface probably makes sense immediately. But imagine you're completely new to automation. You're looking at triggers, actions, fields, filters, connections, permissions. Suddenly the 5-minute automation sounds a little less magical. And this is an important distinction. The product may be capable of doing something. That doesn't automatically mean you'll enjoy setting it up. So my question isn't, does WP Sync have automation? Obviously, that's the point of the product. My question is, how much work does it take before that automation actually saves me work? That's the calculation I'd make before buying. Now let's address the number you're probably going to notice in the marketing. WP Sync is promoted with a large number of integrations, currently advertised as 143 plus connections. Sounds impressive. But I'm going to tell you why I don't care about that number by itself. Imagine the software supports 143 tools. You use 3. And one of those 3 doesn't support the exact workflow you need. Then those other 140 integrations are basically irrelevant to you. So don't ask, how many integrations does WP Sync have? Ask, does it connect my tools in the way I need? That is the buyer's question. And it leads directly into the biggest comparison. WP Sync versus paying for something like Zapier or Make. Here's where the proposition gets interesting. Services like Zapier and Make are designed specifically around automation. They're established cloud-based platforms. You pay for the service. WP Sync takes a different approach. It's centered around WordPress. And its sales proposition emphasizes a one-time purchase rather than the recurring task-based model associated with some automation platforms. That can sound like an obvious win. But don't jump there yet. Because there's another cost people forget. Your time. If WP Sync saves you $20 or $30 a month but takes you hours to configure and troubleshoot every workflow, the math changes. So the question isn't simply, which one is cheaper? It's, which one gives me the least friction for the workflows I actually run? And there's one group for whom that answer could be very different from everyone else. If you're an affiliate marketer, an email marketer, a WordPress product seller, or an agency freelancer managing multiple workflows, this is where WP Sync becomes more interesting. Why? Because you're more likely to have the exact problem automation software is designed to solve. For example, a lead enters here. A buyer comes from there. Your email platform needs a tag. Your CRM needs a record. Your team needs a notification. And all of those systems need to stay synchronized. That's where repetitive manual work starts becoming expensive. But if you run a simple website with one form and one email list, honestly, you may not need this. And that's important because I don't want to turn this review into everyone should buy WP Sync. They shouldn't. Here's the test I'd use. Take a piece of paper. Write down every repetitive data transfer task you currently perform. Maybe it's lead email list, purchase customer tag, form CRM, order spreadsheet, new customer notification. Now count how often you're doing each one. Once a month. Probably not a big problem. Every day. Now we're talking. Because automation becomes valuable when repetition becomes expensive. Low repetition equals maybe overkill. High repetition equals much more interesting. And there's another thing I'd check before spending $1. Which plan actually gives you the connection you need? Because this is where people can easily overspend. The public launch information currently lists pricing around $47 for the entry offer, $97 for the next tier, and $147 for the larger package. But I want you to pause here. Don't automatically buy the $147 option. And don't automatically buy the $47 option either. First, identify your workflow. Because the right plan is the one that contains the tools you actually need. The public promotional material describes different levels of access and additional connections features across the packages. But launch offers can change. So on the day you're watching this, check the actual checkout page before buying. Verify. Current price. Included integrations. License terms. And exactly what each upgrade unlocks. That takes about 30 seconds. And it can save you from buying the wrong package. Now let's talk about the upgrades. This is where I'm going to give you a very simple rule. Don't buy an OTO because the page tells you it's the best value. Ask, what problem does this solve for me? If the answer is, I don't know, skip it. If the answer is, this unlocks a connection I actually need, now it's worth considering. The public material around WP Sync and related offers has described additional licensing and upgrade options, but the exact funnel can change during a launch. So verify what you're actually being offered. You don't need every upgrade to make the core product useful. And that brings us to something much more important than the upgrades. What happens if you don't buy WP Sync at all? Let's say you don't buy it. You can still do the work manually. Export the contacts. Download the file. Clean the data. Import it. Apply tags. Check everything. Repeat. Technically, that costs nothing. But it costs time. And if you're doing that once a month, fine. If you're doing it every single day, now the equation changes. That's why I wouldn't evaluate WP Sync by asking, is $47 cheap? I'd ask, how much repetitive work am I currently paying for with my time? That's the real comparison. This is the strongest use case for me. A WordPress-centered business with multiple systems that constantly need to exchange information. That's where the product has a logical reason to exist. You aren't buying it because it's trendy. You're buying it because your systems aren't talking to each other properly. And if the workflow you need is supported, a tool like this could remove a surprisingly annoying amount of administrative work. But there is still one question I haven't answered. Is this actually easier than the alternatives? And that is where I think different buyers will reach completely different conclusions. If your business isn't centered around WordPress, and you're connecting a huge number of cloud applications, and you already have complex automation running successfully, I wouldn't switch just because WP Sync has a one-time price. There's something valuable about using a mature cloud automation platform that already fits your workflow. On the other hand, if WordPress is at the center of your business, and your automation requirements fit the supported integrations, WP Sync becomes a much more interesting proposition. So this isn't really WP Sync versus Zapier. It's which architecture makes more sense for your business. That's a much more useful comparison. Let's make the positives very specific. Pro number 1. WordPress-centered automation. If WordPress is already central to your business, that can make the concept attractive. Pro number 2. Potential reduction in repetitive work. If you're constantly transferring customer or lead data, automation can eliminate manual steps. Pro number 3. Multiple integrations. The advertised connection library gives users more possibilities than a plugin designed for one narrow workflow. Pro number 4. One-time pricing proposition. If the current offer and licensing fit your needs, avoiding recurring task-based charges can be financially attractive. But now let's balance that properly. Because there are some real reasons I wouldn't recommend this to everyone. Con number 1. You need an actual automation problem. If you don't have repetitive workflows, you're buying capability you may never use. Con number 2. Integration count can be misleading. The only integrations that matter are the ones you actually need. Con number 3. Automation can become complicated. More control means more configuration. Con number 4. Launch pricing and package contents can change. So don't rely on an old review screenshot. Check the current checkout. And there's one final issue. Support and reliability matter more here than they would with a simple WordPress plugin. Because if your customer data stops syncing, this isn't just an annoying software bug. It can affect an actual business process. That's why I'd test important workflows rather than blindly assuming everything will work perfectly. Before buying WP Sync, answer these 3 questions. Question 1. Do I use WordPress as a central part of my business? If no, I'd be cautious. Question 2. Do I regularly move information between multiple platforms? If no, you may not need automation software. Question 3. Does the plan I'm considering support the exact tools and workflow I need? If you haven't checked this yet, don't buy. That 3-question test eliminates most of the unnecessary purchases. And now we can finally talk about my verdict. So, is WP Sync worth it? For the right buyer, I think it can be. But I'm deliberately not giving this a blanket recommendation. If you're an affiliate marketer, email marketer, WordPress seller, agency or business owner with multiple systems constantly exchanging data, this is the type of product worth investigating. The biggest advantage is the potential to automate repetitive workflows while using a WordPress-centered system. The biggest weakness is equally simple. If you don't have the problem, the software doesn't create the value. And that's the part one want you to remember. Consider buying if you already have multiple tools. You have repetitive data transfer tasks. Your required integrations are supported. And the current price makes sense compared with your existing automation costs. Don't buy if you're buying because you think it will magically make money. You don't know what you would automate. You don't use the supported ecosystem. Or you're simply attracted by the large integration number. Software is a tool. It doesn't replace having a business. If you've watched this entire review and you've identified a workflow that WP Sync could genuinely simplify, I've put the official link below. You can check the current price, available integrations and what's included in each package. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.